Hello everyone, and welcome to One Kill Report Podcast, episode 188. I'm Benjamin Yoder, here today to give you a special report. I have finished Xenoblade Chronicles X. We did it. It only took, I don't know, I think the game came out in 2015, and I actually got the game before it came out. I don't know if I ever told that story before, but yeah, I was at a, Toys R Us when Xenoblade Chronicles X was going out, or I just happened to be there, and I used to go there because they used to have stuff that was on sale a lot. I got Red Steel 2 there for $9. I almost picked up, what was it? It's that one Zombie Panic Wonderland was on 3DS. I almost got that once because that was $10, but I ended up, I don't need it. I shouldn't have gotten it, so I did not get it. But yeah, so occasionally I'd go to Toys R Us and they would have some decent deals. And yeah, one time I went and Xenoblade Chronicles X was on the shelf, even though it wouldn't come out for a week or two. And so one thing that more recently you'll find with some of these bigger outlets like Toys R Us or Walmart is that even if they put it on the shelf, they won't sell it to you. They'll go and scan it. It'll say, "Hey, this game's not out yet, so you can't buy it." But I figured I'd try. But it kind of worked out because there was this whole hubbub that happened at the Toys R Us where there's a huge group of people in front of, or not a huge group, there's two people in front of me that had these carts and carts full of stuff, and I think they were trying to get all of it and put it all on layaway, and it was a ridiculous amount of stuff, and there's only one person working, so we were sitting there, or I was sitting in there in line with this copy of Xenoblade Chronicles X, okay, let me see if I can buy this. And this whole thing happened with the layaway stuff in front of me, so they had to take care of them first, and it took forever. And then once they finished scanning everything, I forget what happened, but basically they had to return everything immediately at that point, and they couldn't stop returning it back, so they had to rescan everything back in. It was a ridiculous amount of stuff, so I stood there for probably about 45 minutes to an hour waiting along with a bunch of other people. The poor guy was some college kid who was just there to do his job, and there's just a ton of people there, and at least I think I'm pretty decent about customer service stuff, so I'm just standing there fine, I already know that what I'm doing is not probably gonna work out, but everybody else is sitting there heckling him, and it's oh, come on, leave him alone. It's not this isn't his fault, right? Anyways, so long story short, I got up there and and it'd been an hour, and he scanned it and it didn't let it go through. He was just all flustered, and basically he rang it up as a generic charge for whatever the cost was, and I basically got to buy it even though it wouldn't let him sell it. So yeah, I got it a week or two early. I think I played online. I have to go back. I might actually have a recording of when I first started playing. So maybe I disabled the online out of fear of getting banned or something, because some of these things, if you play them early and you connect to the servers, Nintendo's hey, what are you doing, boy? And then kicks you off. With the Hyrule Age of Calamity stuff, people were streaming that game in Europe and New Zealand, and then they got banned on Twitch because it technically was not out in the US or something weird. So yeah, anyways, so it's been 5 years. I don't know if I should have told that story, but here I did it. There you go. That was the beginning of this journey, and it ended with me putting I put in about 60-ish hours, I think, since the December 31st. So I went from 58 hours clocked in to 123 hours. So yeah, it was a lot of time, but I'm glad I sat down and really committed to it. I wasn't really expecting to do that, but once I kind of saw the, end of the road and was able to see that, that I was going to be able to finish it, I was well, let's go ahead and do this. And I'm glad I finished it. I like I said earlier, I think I said it last week, I grief about that game all the time, or griefed about the game all the time, and there are definitely problems with that game. And I don't want to sit there and be oh, Xenoblade Chronicles X is a this amazing, perfect experience. But it's still a good game, and, I don't personally like open world stuff, so there's some things in that game that bother me that I think aren't necessarily bad. They're just, kind of the nature of an open world game. But I generally really enjoyed it, and we'll have, I'll probably do some kind of like casual review or something on it sometime in the near future to kind of give my full thoughts. Although I've talked about it so much on this podcast, I don't know how many people really need me to go back and talk about it in depth. But hey, it's been a 5-year journey. Let's go ahead and wrap it up and do a full not a full video review, but top it off. Put a little hat on it. I don't know why I put a little hat on it, but a little top hat on that game case. I feel like you're done, you're finished. So yeah. So in terms of what I'm gonna play next, obviously I've got the stuff that I started up and haven't finished yet, like the Tozan RPG, Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine. Alleyway is one I want to get back to as well, even though Alleyway is just kind of doing the same thing over and over and over again. So but those things, at least Indiana Jones and the Tozan RPG, those things are going to require me to do more work when I'm done with them. And I'm already kind of behind on stuff right now. So I think what I'll probably do is focus on making videos. I need to do the Valkyria Revolution video. I want to move that forward somewhat, probably. Or at least make sure the script is finalized and everything so I can go ahead and begin editing the video itself. And then I might also go ahead and edit together a couple casual reviews, just to give some content for there to be before I finish that Valkyria Revolution thing, because I do have Ridge Racer that I need to do, and then casual review for, and there's also Xenoblade Chronicles X. I need to do casual review for that. So there's I definitely have stuff to fill in some time until I can get that Valkyria Revolution video all finished up. One thing I might do, and I don't remember, I think I talked about this on the stream last week. I don't remember the last time I talked about this on the podcast, is there are two things that I also wanted to do a year or two ago. And that was for Sword Art Online Fatal Bullet, they added some additional story content and some updates. It's not like a paid DLC pack. It's just something that you download for free. And I might be interested in just kind of going and seeing what that is. And if it's something that's like fairly quick and reasonable to clear, then I might go ahead and go do that, just because I had already played all the DLC in that game. So it'd be nice to just, make sure I have the final check mark on that game, basically. I don't expect much from it. I really, I bought all the DLC of that game, really hoping it would eventually do something for me. Fatal Bullet, that's one of the ones I wish I did like a casual review of back when I originally wrote it, and if I had this format previously in a position that I could have used it, because Fatal Bullet's a game that I'm very split on, and I do like in some ways, but I also find that it just kind of underperforms in a ton of different ways, and I ended up never really doing anything with it. I did like a quick play at one point, but the quick play format really limits me to talking about a very particular section of a game. And so I feel like that video is just not a great video, to be honest. So it would have been nice to do like a casual review, and maybe once I finish playing the DLC, that might reinvigorate my memories a bit and I can do something. But I think it's just been too long that I'll probably have to just pass on doing anything further, at least without playing it yet again. I think I had to play through that game twice. I'm trying to remember why. I think there was some content you had to play through the game twice to do. I think there's a hard mode as well, if I recall correctly. So yeah, but there's a real ending is what it was. That's what it was. You had to play through the game and get the real ending, and you had to build up your relationship, I think, with certain characters. And the real ending is what made me more interested in the story of that game, because I actually like parts of that real ending, despite it being kind of unsatisfying, to be honest. And then Final Fantasy 15 Comrades, that's something I wanted to get back to. That's another one where it's like I'm not quite sure what I need to do in Final Fantasy 15 Comrades. I did the first 20 or so hours of it and got the kind of end credits of the initial release of Comrades, but they provided updates as that game was live for a while. And I don't know if those updates are just like, grindy quests that you just kind of can do. Like, I don't really care about just leveling up or just completing content to complete content. But if there's actual story content that they added, I personally would be interested in seeing that additional story content, because that's kind of the last Final Fantasy 15 story content I have, unless I start looking at, like, Pocket Edition or something, which is just kind of a retelling of the base Final Fantasy 15. I wouldn't mind playing Final Fantasy 15 Pocket Edition. It looks like an interesting game, and as somebody who really didn't like the open world aspects of Final Fantasy 15, I kind of like the idea of having something that's like more linear from start to finish. And seeing how that would be presented story-wise, if that feels like a better experience than kind of the weird nature of Final Fantasy 15. If you don't know, like, halfway through Final Fantasy 15, like, it's an open world game from the start, and then, like, halfway through, they're like, oh no, we ran out of money. We're just gonna launch you down this linear path straight to the end. And I like all the linear path stuff. I'm like, oh, this is when the game gets good. Other people felt differently. Other people feel like that it was just rushing through the game and not really, doing what they wanted the game to be doing. But I would be interested in seeing what an experience of that game would look like, if it's linear from start to finish. That's the impression of that game, the Pocket Edition. I can't say for sure what it is like structurally, but from what I've seen, that seems to be the case, where it's like a much more linear experience. So maybe someday. It's on the Nintendo Switch, and it's fairly short. I think it's like 20 hours, which actually kind of checks out for, probably how much mainline story content there is in Final Fantasy 15. So it also seems like maybe it'd be like a fun stream RPG. A good 20-hour RPG is like a good stream RPG. Anything that's longer than that, I start getting really iffy about. Like, in the case of, like, Industrial Spy Operation Espionage, when I realized that game was going to take me close to like 30 hours, I was like, I don't want to just play this all at once. I want to take a break halfway through this. So I feel like 20 hours is like the maximum length I want for a stream game. So yeah. One other thing I want to do as well, and I don't remember how much I talked about this in the 2021 plans video, but I do think I want to do some smaller write-ups on the website. I was talking about Dojin games last week, and I was like, how can I cover these Dojin games in a way that's, like, reasonable? like some of those games are like, less than 10 minutes long or something like that, or they're very simple or straightforward, so they don't really need a, like, full video or anything like that, and like, they don't really need a lot of attention on them. So I might do a little, like, Dojin write-ups on the website, and play around with that idea and see if that's like a fun way to approach some written content. It's not going to be as extensive as, like, the full articles I used to do. But considering the last article was my 2019 in review article, I think there should be some written stuff on the website. And, again, it's not going to be some big, huge thing, I hope. I almost said fluffy thing, big, huge thing, I hope. I hope it's something I could do pretty easily and make it, something I could do quickly, I guess. Because really, written content is not something that gets a lot of attention on the website. So I don't want to invest a ton of time into it, but I would like to keep doing it because I do like to write. I do like to write about games as well, but I just kind of chose the YouTube as the focus a couple years ago because that seemed like the most promising avenue. And I like making videos as well. So I'm pretty 50-50 on making videos and writing. They really are very similar things, but with kind of different steps. With a written thing, I have to kind of make sure I clean it up and that the actual text is really solid. Where with a video, I can just kind of, make a script and, I don't have to worry about punctuation or anything that much. Just kind of focus on making sure that it reads well, but then I have to go through the process of, audio editing and video editing, and videos definitely take longer than articles. But I get to sacrifice, having to like nail down this text to make sure it's as perfect as I can make it. Right. I'm always going to get some typos. I had my Final Fantasy 13 mini review, 13.2 mini review. I misspelled Lightning's name as Lighting every single time and didn't catch it for about 6 months. And then I went back and looked at it once. And I was like, oh, I misspelled her name every time. So, yeah, we actually got some news this week. I was not really expecting that, given how, it's the first of the year, but, maybe yeah, I don't know. It was a little quiet over the holidays, so you know, I was kind of expecting it to be a little bit longer before we started getting some news here. One is, and this is the big news story for me, Bombergirl PC is finally coming. This was announced I think 3 years ago at this point, or maybe it wasn't as long. It felt like forever. They announced that Bombergirl was going to come to PC, and that it was going to, basically connect to the servers, and you could play, on PC at home, and you can also interact with arcade players and everything like that. Initially. Now it sounds like that's not the case. Now it sounds like you're put into a PC-specific community for Bombergirl. Interestingly enough, and if you don't know what Bombergirl is basically kind of this is maybe not a great description of it, but it's my idea of it. I say this because I don't know what MOBAs are really, but it feels kind of somewhat like a MOBA Bomberman game in some ways. There's these towers you go and you try to bomb, and you basically are advancing down these lanes almost. It's a very like forward momentum Bomberman in some ways from what I've played. You have like different melee skills and things like that. But it's also very, very erotic. It's got like ecchi elements because it's Bombergirl, so we got to make it horny. So yeah, but I played a little bit in Japan, and I actually really liked what I played of it. I didn't dedicate my time to it because I really was focused on a Tokodal, and before I found a Tokodal machine, I was focused on Aikatsu. So that was my focus on that trip, and I figured Bombergirl, if it was coming to PC potentially, I could play that here in the US potentially. So you can do that, and I think they had an open beta this week. I did not register and try it because I was too busy playing Xenoblade Chronicles X. I actually didn't finish Xenoblade Chronicles X until the day I'm recording this, but yeah, so I might give that a go. It's interesting billing model wise because it's basically just the arcade billing model. You pay per play essentially. So it's I don't know how I feel about that per se. I would obviously rather just purchase the game so I could just play it and continue to play it. But if it's gonna be the same as the arcade game, there's something about it that my brain's like, well, maybe that's fine. I don't know. I hope if I do play it, I hope I don't invest a ton of money into it. But I feel like a game like that is gonna have a pretty high ceiling of skill. But we'll see. Maybe if you play it a little bit at a time, it doesn't feel nearly as bad as if you just dump $30 into it on a weekend or something, right? However much money. So arcades, I feel like arcades are expensive, but as long as you're doing it rarely, it's probably fine. But if it becomes a weekly thing, you got to be careful with your money, I feel like. I don't know. I feel like I blow a bunch of money when I go to an arcade, but maybe it's because I'm bad at video games. So it's one of those things that whenever I go to arcade, I end up playing on-rail shooters all the time. I don't know if this is the best use of my money. maybe just go buy Guns of LA on the Wii for, I don't know how much money. $10. I have no idea how much that costs. Maybe it's one of those weird Wii games that got really expensive, but there's definitely other avenues I can go to play our on-rail shooters on the Wii if I don't want to worry about peripherals. And then there's also PS2 games, Ninja Assault, where you have to have the gun cons and things like that, and a CRT, which I do have a CRT, and I haven't been using my CRT, so it'd be nice to have a way to use my CRT for something. But yeah, that's pretty low priority. On-rail shooters are pretty low priority. Anyways, Bombergirl, I might give that a shot, and I'll definitely talk to you guys about it if I do. Akiba's Trip, Hellbound and Debriefed. I thought this was a new Akiba's Trip game, but actually it's a remaster of the original game. I believe it's only been announced for Japan so far. If you don't know what this is kind of this is one of those games that I haven't played or paid much attention to, so maybe I'm getting this wrong. But it's kind of in some ways an action brawler kind of thing. But I think the whole point, speaking of ichi games, you strip the clothes off of other people, and you, I don't remember why you do it. It's something to do with making sure they're not infected or something with something. I seem to recall, but the whole core thing seems to be about basically stripping clothes off people, and you're in Akihabara doing it or whatever. And it always seemed kind of fun. There was the second game came out here in the US as well as Akiba's Beat, I believe it's what it's called. But I always kind of wanted to play the original one first, just because I knew that other one was technically the second game. So if this one gets localized, I might consider picking it up. It's coming out for Switch and PS4. It's also one of those interesting cases when we talk about, like, changes that have to be made on more modern releases on PlayStation due to their policies. It's one of those cases where we can look back at the original PSP game that was released and see if there were any, like, changes that were made, that we assume Sony's policies kind of pushed them to make. Also, you can see if there's differences between the PlayStation 4 and the Switch release as well. But they seem to keep at least the part where you're ripping people's clothes off and stripping them down to their underwear, at the very least. I don't know about the first game, but the second game, I remember at the time appreciating that at least from some of the footage I saw, the guys got equal treatment of you got to rip their clothes off too. And I do remember some zoomed in crotch shots as well, with like little, everything detailed. So, it's just a goofy game overall. There's like, you can run around town in like a bear suit, I think is what I saw on the trailer, and like a chef's outfit. You can put on like gothic Lolita clothes and things like that. So I don't know. It seems like a goofy, fun game. It sure does look like a PSP game. I saw in the announcement there, like, we finally can fully realize how the character illustrations for this game looks, and it's like, this still looks like a PSP game, and your character models still are pretty low poly. It's not a big deal though. Like, it's whatever. It's a budget game or whatever, and a remake of or a remaster of a PSP game. So I don't really expect much. So the rest of the stories are actually just kind of like interesting notes about a variety of things from this week. One being that Microsoft apparently is asking Xbox Series S and Xbox Series X users if they are interested in the DualSense features of the PlayStation 5's controllers. Maybe implying that they're looking at maybe implementing something like that in the Xbox controllers. I believe there is some sort of haptic feedback for the Xbox controllers, but for like the triggers and things like that. But I believe how that works is very different from how the PlayStation's controllers implement it, and the PlayStation 5's DualSense controllers have a bit more of a dynamic way that it handles with like pushing back on the triggers and things like that. So like if you're like spraying a water hose or something and you hold down the trigger, the trigger kind of vibrates back at you to represent kind of like the tension of the hose, as the water's coming out of it. And I thought it was interesting that like post-launch we're seeing this kind of like question of, hey, maybe we can revisit the controller and see if we can bring in some features that Sony had. I don't know how effective this is going to be. This is one of the things that, like, even the fact that Sony has this on this platform, it's hard to know how much people actually use it, or developers will actually use it, because, they're making games for PC, they're making games for Xbox, and, if both platforms launch with this kind of controller at launch, and, people are using those controllers on PC as well, then I could definitely see a case where we potentially see this feature be used more regularly. But kind of because we already missed the boat with the Xbox coming out, I don't see that really ever being something that gets a lot of focus outside of Sony exclusive games on the platform. So it's interesting that they're asking about it now. I'd be curious to see if they do eventually somewhere down the line introduce a controller that has similar features. I definitely wouldn't mind that per se, but it just like introducing it like right after you launch your console, I think makes it a little harder to guarantee that players will have that type of controller. Maybe if it was something that's introduced in the next year or so. I mean, it's been a while since we had like a mid-console shift of like a controller feature set. I feel like we had the analog controllers, the rumble stuff, but all that was like the 32-bit / 64-bit era, and then the era after that when we're looking at like GameCube, PS2, and Xbox. All that stuff was generally starting to become fairly standardized at that point. So I just don't imagine it being something that's going to be relevant in the near future. That, and I don't know if we've seen any cases where the haptic feedback of the PlayStation 5's DualSense has been like, this is a game changer. It definitely is a gimmick. And I like those gimmicks. But yeah, I just like one of those things that like, even if you do get in the hands of all developers, who's going to actually utilize it in a way that's interesting or good? Like, will that be something that is, utilized in smart ways or ways that make it improve the player's experience, or will it just be some throwaway thing that people throw in? I know that I'm probably a bit more accepting of these kind of gimmicks. I was on the HD Rumble train despite having yet to experience. I'm still on the HD Rumble train, but I've yet to experience good HD Rumble, which, supposedly Mario Party has good HD Rumble, but I just have a hard time justifying buying Super Mario Party without having other people to play with. But, and 1-2 Switch, the same thing. But I probably should pick up one of those, and even without the multiplayer mechanic, just see if I can, mess around with it and be like, how many balls are in this Joy-Con? Let me roll the Joy-Con around and just feel how many balls are in there, I guess. I don't know. Or like, what else is there? I'm trying to think. I feel like that is the only good example I've ever heard of HD Rumble, is figuring out how many balls are in a box. That's pretty much it. So yeah, I don't know. But I like those kind of gimmicks. So I'm definitely open to there being more applications for DualSense and Microsoft adopting that, so we can see more developers fully utilize that, and maybe even come over to PC releases. If I don't really know what the current standard PC controllers are, but I'd imagine most people are probably just using Xbox controllers, PlayStation controllers. I think PlayStation 4, since the DualShock 4, the PlayStation's had like a driver for Windows 10. I could be wrong about that. I've never used a DS4 on a PC, or at least without using like a Joy. I think it's called DS4 Tool. Is that what it's called? Which was a okay program at the time when there wasn't like any kind of way to use a driver. But I did purchase a Xbox One controller at some point, and I've been using that on PC for a while, and it's worked out pretty well. I actually like it quite a lot. So it is a little weird having an Xbox One controller without having an Xbox One. But I'll get there someday, or at least get an Xbox Series X or something. There's also some interesting Nintendo-related stories here, too. One being that Nintendo's bought Next Level Games. I don't think this is particularly surprising, although it is something that, is not something that happens often with Nintendo. I think the people noted, like, the last time Nintendo bought a developer was back in, I think, when they acquired Monolith Soft in 2007 or so. Because Monolith Soft mainly worked with Namco at the time, and Namco may have owned them at the time, actually. And I believe Bandai Namco still owns some amount of Monolith Soft, but like a very, very minor amount. I could be wrong about that, but for at least for a while, Namco owned a certain amount of Monolith Soft. So yeah, but I mean, like, Next Level Games has been doing a lot of stuff with Nintendo, and it's really paid off, with Luigi's Mansion specifically. I think Luigi's Mansion 2 and 3 sold really well. They were received very well. I do think they kind of struggle with some of the things that I feel like a lot of games that are developed outside of Nintendo but are for Nintendo kind of struggle with, where they maybe don't quite hit the level of quality of like a traditional Nintendo game, but come in like just below that, and they seem like they make really solid games, and they've been making them for Nintendo since I think Mario Strikers on the GameCube. Maybe something before that as well, but that's the first one I can recall at the very least. And they made a lot of Wii games as well. They worked on the Transformers series on the Wii, I'm pretty sure, and things like that. So I think it's about time, maybe, but at the same time, I probably would have said the same thing about Rare back in the day if I was actually paying attention to the industry. If you look at like just how much Rare was supporting the Nintendo 64 and the effort they're putting into the platform, and the quality of game they're putting out. I mean, I'm pretty sure at the time it was pretty shocking to most people that Nintendo wasn't the one who bought Rare, that Microsoft was the one who ended up buying them in the end. So I maybe it's not. Maybe it's not as inevitable as I thought, but they've just been working really close to Nintendo for a long time, and Nintendo's been allowing them to work on IP that matters. Luigi's Mansion is yes a side IP, but it's like one of the more beloved one these days at the very least. It's not like Mario Strikers where it's like, yeah, you're making a Mario sports game, right? Which people like Mario Strikers, don't get me wrong. But I think Mario Strikers doesn't have exactly the same value as like, or maybe same respect as like a Luigi's Mansion does. Even though, I think that the respect for Luigi's Mansion came quite a bit after that game came out. Because for a while, Luigi's Mansion was kind of the joke of the GameCube, I feel like. Most people would be like, ah ha ha, GameCube launched with Luigi Mansion. Woo, boy. Nowadays, I don't think anybody really bats an eye at that. It's like, yeah, Luigi's Mansion, that's a cool game. But at the time, Luigi's Mansion is a short game. It's not a Mario game. Every console launched with a Mario game, and I think value was a big part of games back then for sure. And having a shorter game was kind of viewed as a really bad thing. I think these days, if something's like, a few hours long, it's not necessarily a terrible thing, especially as you become an adult and as the age of people who played games have gotten older. I think there's a lot of value in the shorter experiences, and people appreciate that more. Where if you're just trying to buy one game a month, well, you're gonna buy Persona 5, or something like that, right? Or Xenoblade Chronicles X, because it's going to last you, however many hundreds of hours. So. In more scarier news, I had actually missed this before it resolved itself, but apparently DSiWare, a ton, I don't know how many in total, or what percentage of the library, but the majority of DSi, or I don't want to say majority, a large number of DSiWare titles were removed from the Nintendo 3DS eShop. If you don't know, when the DSiWare or when Nintendo 3DS had its eShop launch, they imported basically, as far as I know, the majority of the DSiWare's library. I think there's some things that didn't come over. But the large majority of the DSiWare library came over to the 3DS's eShop, and apparently sometime this week they just removed a ton of them. I think the majority of them, but the majority of them are back now. Let me actually pull up the list here because there are some that still did not make it back. Most of these are not things that are worth talking about. 5-in-1 Solitaire, Digger Dan and Kaboom, I don't know what that is. Matchup, Word Searcher 3. So titles like that are the ones that did not end up coming back. And I don't think Nintendo provided an explanation of why a bunch of stuff got delisted and then added back on. But the one on here that I think is worth mentioning is Face Pilot Fly with your Nintendo DSi camera. I tried looking into this, and I think this is a Nintendo published game. And it kind of looks kind of Pilot Wings-ish. It's not Pilot Wings, obviously, directly. But if it is a Nintendo published game, and it is kind of tangentially related to Pilot Wings, or at least similarly genre-wise, I definitely think it's something that would be worth potentially looking at for somebody looking into that library, right, of Nintendo flying based games or Pilot Wings, being a little bit of a footnote at the end of in a piece that are talking about Nintendo flight games. So I think it's a little sad that it's gone, but I think the majority of the DSiWare library has been backed up and uploaded online, similar to WiiWare. So I don't think there's any real concern over it being lost to time or anything like that. I have not gone to look to see if it's available, but I believe the majority, if not all, of the DSiWare stuff has been backed up. I did have to go and get some DSiWare stuff loaded on my hacked DS at some point, and one of those being a Club Nintendo game that you could not purchase. So I do know you can do that. You can install that on an emulator or a hacked 3DS or a hacked DSi as well. DSiWare's games are a little harder to work with than a usual DS game, unfortunately, in terms of being able to capture it and things like that. So that is a challenge, and why I haven't really done much DSiWare coverage probably. That, and I have plenty of other stuff that I'm working on all the time. But yeah, it's a little scary that it removed a bunch of that stuff. I would like to definitely, and I think they probably will, hopefully in the future give a heads up if they ever are like, hey, we're going to remove all the DSiWare content. I definitely think that there is a advantage to them to do that, because then people go and people like me are going to go buy a bunch of stuff off DSiWare and be like, okay, what do I want? what do I want to get? Right. So I did that with WiiWare and Virtual Console, and I spent a couple $100, I think, in total on WiiWare and Virtual Console before the services shut down. And again, you can still get that stuff, just you can't get it officially. You gotta pirate it or whatever. So it's more of just, feeling like you did it the right way, making sure you paid for your Muscle March. you gave Bandai Namco their $5 and you'll feel good about it. So yeah. Anyways, I guess that's it for this week. Thanks for coming. OneControlPort.com is the website. Like I said earlier, I kind of finished up Xenoblade Chronicles X today, so I don't really have immediate idea of what will be coming up next here. But you'll start seeing some content here. Probably by next week, I'll have something to say. If not, things already posting on the website. I do want to do some written stuff, and I hope that is something that is, shorter content I can put together, fairly quickly. I will probably sit down and try to work on some stuff tomorrow. I'm recording this on a Saturday night. So hopefully on Sunday I can kind of sit down, edit it, or write up some stuff and edit some stuff and get some movement on those things. And then we'll go from there and see where things go. Anyways, thank you again for coming. OneControlPort.com is the website. I don't know what the stream plans are for this week yet, so I'll try to update you as I figure that out. But Thursday at 7 p.m. is when I will be here, and we'll stream something. I'll be there streaming something. I'll be putting some video game in front of you if you come. So yeah. Anyways, I hope you have a great week. Bye.